Welcome to the Drive Able podcast, where we discuss all things about driving and safer community transport for people with disabilities and medical conditions. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you go back and listen to the last episode, episode 12. That was an awesome episode where we interviewed Dee and her all about her journey and her story as a carer and a mum of someone with a disability and working with NDIS.
Yeah, g'day everybody. This is episode 13, and like every episode that we do where we follow on for an interview, we are digging deeper. And in this one, we're digging deeper into the products that Dee described that she used for Leanne, but we're also talking about the journey that she's been through as well with NDIS. So, Ali, you ready to do this?
Let's do it. Driving is something many take for granted, but when someone has altered ability, then driving or getting out and about in your own car can be challenging. Driving with a disability doesn't mean you have to drive an old clapped out car with farm-like machinery, and relying on a wheelchair doesn't mean waiting for hours and then being in the back of a maxi access cab getting car sick. The Drivable podcast is designed to introduce and explore driving aids for people with disabilities, vehicle modifications, the NDIS, research, medical guidelines, driving techniques, and much, much more. The Drivable podcast is to help you be informed and be in control of your own independence so you can experience freedom through driving safely and reliably. I'm Ali, and with me is Brad, and together we have over 30 years of experience in disability and driving. Enough of the intros, let's get into it.
Okay, everybody, this is episode 13. And in this episode, we're following on from episode 12, where we interviewed Dee. Dee's a carer for Leanne, and Leanne's got a brain injury where she was starved of oxygen. And she talked about the journey that she went through with NDIS. And we had so many takeaways. I've been in this area for 12 years, and learning from Dee was amazing. I took so much away from that interview. Ali, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that was awesome. I loved her passion, her dedication, and I guess that was what I said before in that interview. That was why I was really keen to get her out there, because in my experience, I really want to highlight those carers and the mums and dads, because the passion and dedication, I see it all the time with those mums and dads. And as you saw, she's more of a bloody product expert than I am, and again, I see that all the time with the carers and the mums, because they're so passionate about making sure everything's done right, and so they get right into it and they know everything, and often they're kind of forgotten, and you don't even consult them, and they're kind of on the side, and they really need to be front and center of the whole thing, as you can see.
They know their children better than anybody else. I mean, of course, they're parents, and they live the disability every single day, and it's not right to overlook it by any means. And we really need to get family and carers involved throughout the whole process. That's one massive takeaway that we can all take from this. I'm hoping that some NDIS delegates are listening into this as well. I'm hoping that OTs are listening into this, and I'm hoping that they've listened to episode 12 and really thought about that impact that it has on family as well.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about Dee's, I guess, approach is that's also why I really wanted to get it out there and even have other mums and carers and dads listen to it, because the way she was talking about that you still have to work with those OTs, you still have to work with NDIS. She wasn't writing anybody off, and that's a very important thing to point out, because that happens a lot. You'll get someone who's had that's very common. You might have you might not agree with what your OT says, so then you just completely write him off, and you go, "What? This guy's an idiot. He's not listening to me." And it's kind of like, well, you're working together, you know what I mean? And you've got to listen to what they've got to say, but you may need to push back, because you've got to look at, you could see she was switched on as to, this is who I am, this is who my daughter is. Mm-hmm. I'm tuning into your professional opinion, but I'm still going to stand up for, what I know true. And I just thought the way she played that was amazing. And a lot of people can really pick up on that, and understand that everyone is important, but have that confidence to know, who you are and who your kids are, and fight for that.
Absolutely. And I think something that she touched on as well is, and you made mention of it just then as well. If you're not getting a good sense from your OT or from someone else that's trying to represent you, then go and get a second opinion from somebody else, and make sure that you get a quality person helping you through this process, who maybe has got more knowledge or got more experience in this field. If you're struggling,
Yeah,
that's a passionate point of mine.
yeah. And like on that note, actually, the way I could say that is it could be just a bit of feeling. Do you feel that the people that you're working with, your therapists,
Mm,
your planners, all that, are they on your side? If you feel that they're on your side, and that's kind of like maybe a bit of a gut feel based on little things that they're saying, or are they working against you? And if they're on your side, keep them on your side, keep them in your corner. But if they're completely just working against you, find someone that's on your side, and is in your corner. That's really what it's all about.
yeah. So she talked about some specific products, and in these podcasts, we're responding to feedback. We're going to dig deeper into these products, and in this one, we're going to talk about the Coroni system that she spoke about the turnout seat, the Turny Evo seat that she's got in her car, and the Coroni Go wheelchair base. Ellie, you know these products probably better than anybody else. Do you want to describe for people listening into this one, maybe haven't tuned into episode 12 yet, what the Coroni system is and how it works?
Yeah. So basically, it's a combination of two, and I've kept this photo in the background, as you can
Yeah.
see, on
Tune
purpose.
into the YouTube video if you need to see it, mate.
Yep. Basically, you've got what we call most commonly a swivel seat system.
Hmm.
So basically, what I've found in my experience, most people have seen some form of swivel seat in their lives, but generally they would have seen one in like a camper van, where the
Mm.
seat swivels inside, and you can kind of swivel it to from the driver or the passenger seat, and you eat your food when you're on site, right? So whenever we talk about swivel seats, I found from an engineering point of view, people kind of associate that to it. And it's effectively a similar kind of function, but not swiveling inside, swiveling to the outside, and actually coming out of the car. And as you can see from that photo in the background there, you're actually still sitting on the car seat, but the car seat is kind of like almost on a cantilever on the outside of the car.
Mm.
That's the swivel seat component on it. That particular one. There's a couple of brands on the market. There's I think 4 or 5 different companies around the world that make these swivel seats. This one is a Brawnability one. It's called Attorney, but they effectively do. It's
Mm.
like Apple or Android. They've all got their kind of different variations, but they're doing the same kind of function. Then where the Brawnability one in particular has a bit of a unique edge, is they work. So the background with that is they're actually owned by the same company that owns Permobil, and so they integrate wheelchair engineers with car engineers together. They come together and they kind of create a bit of a fusion of a product, and that's what the Coroni is. So the Coroni is almost like a wheelchair base that you can click into this swivel seat, and then basically with a couple of levers and so on, you can slide this person that's over here straight onto a wheelchair base. It locks in, and that car seat then becomes the wheelchair, and basically you allows you to do all these different functions. And this particular version of this brand, the Brawnability one, it's out of Sweden. And the reason why I point that out is because everybody knows about IKEA, and IKEA is out of Sweden, and this is very much a similar kind of philosophy. So everything, when you buy a bed from IKEA, you can interchange everything on it. You can buy different sides, different colors, different legs, all to suit your needs and suit your wants and your desires. And these guys have that same philosophy. So you can have different bases, different wheels, different supports, you name it, can be all completely customized to suit your needs.
Hmm.
And that's what Leanne was Dee was talking about her daughter Leanne. That's why this was such a great product, because it only needed that swivel seat function at the beginning, but as her daughter evolves, this product evolves with them, and they can have supports, they can change seats, they can change bases. So yeah, it's a great product in particular to allow you to evolve, into the future. So
yeah, and as an OT, we've been involved a lot in that prescription area and making sure that for an NDIS point of view that we have considered the seating elements as well. Traditionally, a car seat doesn't have as many components to it as a prescribed wheelchair. So sometimes we need to think about lateral supports, torso supports, thigh supports, head supports, those type of things as well. The seats that come with this system can be built as well. Now, it's not going to have the same level of support as a customized high-level seat in a wheelchair. That it hasn't got to that point. But there are elements that can be added to the seat to be able to make it more supportive, and have those lateral supports that go underneath the arms and along the torso to make sure that people don't skew sideways, and supports their spine. It can have a neck roll, it can have a headrest to be able to support the head from tilting from side to side, and it can have thigh supports as well. We've also done studies as well in regards to the seat base and the cushion that's on the seat base. It's a seat cushion, and it's a harder rebound type of foam, so it's going to last a long time. But there's one seat, the Bev seat, that comes with this that can have an interchangeable memory foam cushion. We can also add another cushion to it, which is memory foam, and it becomes like your bed. So the memory foam layer on top of your bed, and that's been rated as similar to a medium protective cushion, which is quite amazing in regards to putting two cushions together on top of the car seat to be able to make it a really comfy ride and protect from pressure sores.
Yeah. No, they're very customizable. The one thing I will mention, because this is actually something that does come up with therapists and quite a fair bit. When you're in a car, even an able-bodied person, when they get into a car and they start driving around, they are, as soon as you enter the vehicle environment, you're starting to make compromises. And what you have to understand is you're making compromises because you are looking out for your safety, right? So you may make compromises on the way that you interact with the vehicle based on the safety devices. So for example, with me, when I drive the car and they've got all those collision warning systems and lane change systems, sometimes it's a bit of a pain, but I'm making a compromise on that because I know that's better for my safety in the long term. Sometimes you can't have the ideal spec that you need for a wheelchair in your vehicle. And unfortunately, that's just, you're going to have to compromise. And that's somewhere where a lot of therapists have a bit of difficulty understanding. We do try and support a lot around that. Because if they can't get 100% of the right supports within that seat, they go, okay, it's no good, and let's try a wheelchair vehicle, or let's try something else. And that may not be the best option because there's more to it than that. And I guess I wanted to segue that a little bit because into the next point of what Leanne was, Dee was saying about Leanne, her daughter, about the fact of the matter is, with a seat like this, you get to sit inclusively in the car.
Massive point. Huge point.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because that point I very rarely see highlighted. The people that tend to highlight that the most are the end users and their family members. But it's something which doesn't really get flagged by a lot of therapists and a lot of industry. And same with NDIS.
Let's put it this way, Ali, when you're married, when you go driving with your wife in the car, do you put her in the boot?
No.
No.
Right.
Do you put her in the back row of this car?
No.
Where does she sit? Where does she sit?
Yeah.
Right next to you.
And there's one, I mean, I'd love to get Andrew at some point on as well. Andrew Hewitt, who's one of our clients as well, who's had a swivel seat. And he made this exact point. And he said he had a huge falling out or big blowout, with the NDIS over that one simple thing because they couldn't understand. He said, I just want to go with my wife, sit next to her, and go for a bloody coffee. And he goes, for you guys, you don't get that because you just get into the car and do that. But for me, that's like the biggest deal of my whole 6 months. Just go and grab a coffee and be able to sit next to her. But being able to do that, those little things then actually do have massive financial reward where people aren't seeing that. It's down the track, like again, what I've seen it in firsthand with Leanne because we've interacted with them with Dee. Leanne couldn't really communicate too much with people, and she was closed off, very anxious, um, basically not really that useful. But now she's a useful person in society. She's contributing, and as Dee said, she's going to places, buying coffees, buying food, and then that's employing people and paying taxes, and it's this whole self-sufficient wheel that's starting to be turned just by virtue of sitting in the front seat.
Yeah, getting some modifications approved. Now, we are organising an interview with an OT coming up in the future in regards to this. There's been a massive study done over the last couple of years about the social inclusion costs. So we're organising it. It's in the background. She said, yes, we've got to pick a date to do this. So look out for that interview where we talk about the social cost of having modifications approved. And just a little bit of a spoiler alert, just to get you motivated for that. Modifications up to $150,000 have been shown to be repaid to the community in 2 years. $150,000 worth of modifications to a vehicle repaid with social inclusion in around 2 years. That's massive. And that's not including employment and stuff like that either.
I mean, we see that every day. I just see
absolutely
someone when you see them once they're transporting around and a little bit more belief and confidence, 6 months later, 12 months later, they're a completely different person, and they've got people all around them helping all the other people around them. So it's that's a huge thing that I really push on that. So
Now, you guys at Mobility Engineering, and we prescribe it as well, wheelchair access. And we touched on this in the last episode as well. We have NDIS coming back to us regularly when we try to prescribe this Coroni system, saying, have you considered wheelchair access? We believe wheelchair access is what the client needs. Basically asking for us to prove why one system is over the top of another, and really trying to steer us towards wheelchair accessible vans. Now, we're going to get opinionated on this one, and it's up, and those opinions are based around experience that we've had with clients. And we have to preface this by saying not every client is the same. And I would suggest that I'm prescribing both systems, whether it's a Coroni system or a wheelchair access van, on equal footing, depend on the client and the client's needs. The wheelchair accessible van, whether it's a Caddy or a Kia or a Volkswagen multivan, they all need to be assessed on the end use, and also the other elements involved in it as well, like transfers, wheelchairs, the needs of the wheelchair. Like we were saying earlier, if it's a really high level wheelchair, we may not be able to recommend a Coroni system. Wheelchair accessible vans, like we said, come with compromises. It's not the one fit for everybody. This is my opinion. With every modification, there's a compromise. And for wheelchair accessible vans, you're sitting in the rear of the van more often than not. There are conversions where you can get through to the front of the van, but they come at significant cost. Redesigned petrol tanks, redesigned exhaust systems, redesigned flooring throughout the entire van, really high level engineering to make sure the car is stable, because you're cutting through joists across the floor. Really high level modifications at really significant costs. And most of the time, people end up sitting in the second or third row of the car. So that's a compromise. And the other thing is that you're sitting in a wheelchair, and having that wheelchair tied down to the vehicle. Ali, did you want to talk about some of the compromises when we're sitting in a wheelchair compared to a car seat?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll mention before I get into that is one interesting thing I've observed, which could be a bit controversial to some of the therapists out there, but I find a lot of therapists prefer to prescribe a wheelchair accessible vehicle, which is the cutting of the vehicle out the back, for two reasons. One, it's easier for them to fill out the NDIS forms because it's easier to get funding for that. And two, it's pretty much the only product they're familiar with. So they go, you know what? I know this will get through. I know it's going to be funded. I've done it before. So I'm just going to take that lazy option and easy, tick boxes. Because if you do something like a tourney, as you heard from Dee's interview, you've got to have assessments, you've got to fill out forms. It takes ages, it takes hours. And you know, it's not as easy to so that's something that I've observed, and I guess I want to challenge the therapists out there that are thinking that it's not about getting the funding, it's about having the right product for the person. And on that note, even cars where you can, aside from the inclusivity of it, I guess from an engineering point of view, I would recommend people here to go and look up some videos on how cars are built in factories. Cars are built in factories by robots, by super high precision robots that are building things down to the micromillimeter. We're talking like things that down to the precision that humans can't see. And then what we're doing is we're getting this highly sophisticated safety thing, which is all full of complicated materials. Like when you look at a Volkswagen Caddy, for example, and you cut the floor out of that and you put in steel floor, you're not actually cutting steel. You're cutting a very high complex metal that's been created through huge amounts of research and development. You're cutting that out with a saw, a backyard saw, basically, and you're dumping in some standard steel off basically off the shelf, and you're welding it all in place. Now, what you're doing is you're getting a very high-end, high-level robotic, sophisticated item, and you're basically, putting it together with glue and putting it together by hand. Now, I'm not trying to say wheelchair accessible vehicles are unsafe. Like, we sell them and we put them together ourselves, but they're definitely not as safe as not cutting up the car. Because if you go get and you cut, so you were saying something about joists before. Imagine if you had you had a two-story house and you had the upstairs, one of the floors, you just cut the whole floor out and just put a bit of gyprock in there, and just put some other wood underneath and hope for the best. That's sort of what's happening with these cut vehicles. You had a house that was fully designed, fully engineered. Someone came along and goes, you know what, I don't like the height of this floor, I'm just going to change it. And they just get a bunch of mates to do it themselves and just get someone else to come and certify it. Yes, it's going to be safe, it's going to be fine, but if there's an earthquake, we don't actually know what's going to happen to that house. And that's the same thing with this car. If you can avoid cutting it, don't cut it. And then on the sitting on the wheelchair, same sort of thing. When you are sitting in the car seat of a vehicle, cars have to be certified to Australian design rules. They have to be crash tested. Go and look up crash testing in Australia. Just look up crash testing and you'll see all these videos of how they do that. Now, if you're sitting in a wheelchair, you then have to have wheelchair secured down, you have to have tie down points, you have to have seat belts, and you are not being tested to the same level of rigorous safety. There is a compromise on the safety. So people will say to me and it can be confronting sometimes, because people will go, oh, what do you think about this? What if I do it this way and I put my child in this seat, in this wheelchair? And my answer to them is, well, how much do you love your kid, and what is the safety side of it? First, ask about the safety, and how much do you care about the safety, and then we can have the conversation, rather than how much is this going to cost and will this work with my vehicle and so on. Look at it from a safety point of view. If I can do that, and if I can have them out of that wheelchair, I really have to, because I don't want to be cutting cars up if I can avoid it, and that's really, I guess, my whole point of that. And then on top of that, the last thing is, when you cut the car up, it's pretty hard to resell it at the end, and you've lost a lot of money in that whole car. Whereas, like, as you saw with Dee, she's going to take her seat out, she's going to sell her car, probably get pretty good money for that car,
Put the
especially
original
now
seat
with
back in.
COVID and
Yep.
all these great people wanting secondhand cars everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah, put it back in, and then use her Tony into another seat, in another vehicle. And it's going to cost her hardly anything. Approvals are probably going to be very easy for her, because it's probably only going to be a few $1,000s in switching over, and away you go. So it's chalk and cheese, and it's a no-brainer in terms of what to choose. But as you say, this always goes down to assessment, the right assessment, and this is where it is really born. If we're looking at everything, we're talking to everyone, talking to the carer. You've mentioned it many times before, which I think a lot of therapists forget. Part of the assessment is talking to the family, like that they're part of the person, right? And every one of our interviews is demonstrating that time and time again. The family is part of it. So if your assessment doesn't include a discussion with the family and their capabilities, and you're just looking at the end user, you failed. That's the bottom line. Like, you got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah. Look, there's so many good points that you've made in there as well. There's a couple of things that I want to talk from an OT point of view. Sometimes the client needs to be in their wheelchair over a car seat. We need to consider that. So sometimes we can't do anything else other than a wheelchair accessible van. And then it's about trying to find the right access, the right elements inside the van. Is it a Toyota commuter with a raised roof versus cutting the floor and having a access through the back? And we could have a whole nother episode on that, and we might do that in the future as well. Sometimes the person can't sit in a car seat. They just can't. There's no two ways about it. They need to have the specialized wheelchair to be able to support their needs in regards to the high level seating. But with those high level seating, not all of those elements have been crash tested. And we need to keep that in mind. It's the standard chair that's been crash tested to meet ISO standards, and with the tie downs. And most of the time, that's the base and the standard chair. When you start replacing chairs, those seat backs and putting on a different seat on the back, or a different headrest, or a different seat base, or a different cushion, then those elements there actually haven't been tested. And the more moving parts on the wheelchair, the more chances that that's got potential to fail in a crash.
Yeah. It's definitely if you, first of all, as I said before, there is many situations where you do need to have be transporting in the wheelchair like that. This is not to discount that at all. No. It's just to understand that if you don't need it, or to test it. So actually, when we spoke to Dee, also one point she made was they kept going down to the engineers and kept trying different things. I personally was involved in a little bit of that with Dee, and I know at one stage they were even looking at an option of transporting whilst lying down. Right. So the point is you look at everything, they were looking at all different types of options, and this was the best one for them. There was no, okay, let's try and sell this. Let's try and sell something. It was always look at all of the different ideas and try them out. Because again, one of the things which I've learned, I guess through my own career, if you'd like, and I'm sure it's the same with you, you learn about the theory of stuff. I learned about the theory of engineering, but when I actually do the practice, there's a bit of a difference a lot of the times, yeah. And it would be the same thing with a therapist. The therapist often, I find, they might, based on their own knowledge and the theory they've got in their mind, they might write a product off. They'll go, oh, okay, this person's an XYZ disability, and so this product doesn't fit for them based on, my theory. However, if they go and do a trial, they might find this person has got something slightly different that actually can work, and so it's all about, I love that message, all about trying all different things and seeing what works, and not just saying, okay, I just need that van, or I just need that, like, it's a bit frustrating because we get so many times people calling and going, I just want a Kia, and you go, but it's not actually what it is. You're after a car, you're not after a conversion, if you want the conversion, let's talk about what it is that you need rather than the car, the car comes next. And actually that's one point which I thought was interesting, because I haven't heard of that before, but it makes sense, was how Dee was saying when she went and got the car first, NDIS started working against it, because they started saying, well, wait a minute, you've got the car, so obviously you're going to give us all this stuff, and your stuff is going to be a bit corrupt because you've got the car first. And so, but if she did not have the car first and she was going purely for product only, she may not have even hit that barrier, So I thought that was
It's a really interesting one. Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because quite often they use the other argument against us, as in, if you're trying to choose a car, you're biasing it towards a product. In this one, where they're saying that we're putting products in to bias it to the car. So it's can be really tricky. You've got a lot of passion in this. We could hear that in the way that you were talking just then. The biggest thing that we've got to take away from all of this is that trial thing. And it happened to me yesterday. And in this case, it was the client. The client said, no, I won't be able to do that. However, in the trial process, her world lit up, because she actually could see that she could do it. So there's that trial, that getting out and having a go at it, to make sure. And just the other week, the client was adamant that they could do a slide board transfer onto a turnout seat. But through the trial process, we saw that it was not safe, and it wasn't safe for the carer, and it wasn't safe for her. And there's going to be many times that she just won't be able to get out and about. That trial process is vital for everyone involved. And if you can get access to a product, trial it more, trial a different one, trial a similar one, because a little subtle difference in a product can make a massive difference.
Yeah. And the one thing I guess I will say, this will be putting on my mobility engineering hat a little bit. The companies that are trying to sell stuff, you can push them around all you want, because they're desperate for a sale, right? So if you want to buy their product, say, hey, I'm not going to buy it until you get me to try it. And you'll find how quickly they'll come to you as quickly as you can say, hey, so don't be scared. Push them around, push the suppliers around, push the converters around. This is, get the confidence and say, hey, I'm not going to buy your swivel seat, I'm not going to buy your wheelchair, I'm not going to buy any of that stuff until you bring me one and I can try it out. And I know for a fact, from a mobility engineering point of view, if anyone ever challenges us on that, we'll be at your door within a week, and we'll say, okay, no worries, give it a go. But it's natural, you're going to have people trying to push and say, oh, we think this is better, we've tried it with someone else. But you are the consumer at the end of the day. So you can ask for that trial, and if they're not going to do it, go find someone else that will. It's their job to get out there and
we have to try and preface this as well. Some people living in rural locations, it's maybe not as easy to get products out there, or you have to wait a long time for a product to arrive. So, we see clients in Broken Hill who have to consider traveling to Adelaide to trial a product. And even in Adelaide, we don't have all the products available. We just don't. A lot of high-end products are on the East Coast in Sydney or in Melbourne, and we have to converse with product suppliers and try to get the best fit without actually having to trial it. So trial is the best. It opens so many stories, and it opens all of that conjecture around, can this person do it or not, or is it the right fit, or is it not? But if you can't, then you need to be able to dig really deep with questions with the suppliers. And is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? And what happens if this happens? And what happens if that happens? And do your best to have a virtual trial wherever you possibly can.
or another thing which I know Dee's done a lot of as well, and she even mentioned it there. And I've always found the entire industry overwhelmingly supportive is talking to customers that have already had the thing done.
Amazing. Yep.
You know, I found so many times when I found there is like that story of Dee saying, if anyone needs any help or anyone wants to try something out or hear their perspective, just let them know to contact me. Almost every single one of our customers says that, because they've recognized that, I guess, the crap they've had to go through to get to where they are. And they've recognized that if they can share that, they'll help their fellow community members. And yeah, like we've had so many times, especially when we were first getting into this, there wasn't that much stuff around. And as you said, in places like Adelaide and so on, we're trying to get more product out there, but it's not all there. Maybe you can reach out to someone in the community and you'll find that they'll probably help you, and you'll probably get much more insight from them than you know, maybe an OT or even the like to be honest, when like that brawn ability seat, we are involved in that seat quite deeply. But when when Dee was talking about it, in my mind, I was thinking, man, she knows more than I do, and she's you know, she knows bloody everything about this thing, you know, and I'm supposed to be the person that's selling it.
She uses
exactly,
it every
you know,
day.
so that's right, and that's what we find when we talk to our customers. They've got all the little kinks in the system that we never even knew about, you know, and so they can help you, and they really can help share that information. So yeah, we love to sort of bring everyone together, and that is really in that whole spirit of community as well.
Mate, there's a couple of more things that she made mention of that I think are really important to discuss. An impact statement. An impact statement from the family or from the client about what impact is this product going to have on their life, to add weight to the argument. I found that really insightful, and she mentioned it quite a few times of how she believes that had an impact on the decision in the end. And it's something that, look, I'll put my hand up. I don't include that very often, or don't ask the client to do it, but I think I will from now on. I've learned from that about how that impact statement, about they've understood what the product is, and this is their belief of how it's going to impact on their life. What opportunities is it going to open up for them? So that's one that I took away from it.
Yeah, well, I think that if you've got something like that, how can NDIS argue against you? You know, you've gone through and resulted in how that's their mantra, as she said. Their mantra is how you're going to be self-choice. You know, user chooses, integrated, and how can we impact on the community? If you make that statement, that's it. You've considered that, and you pretty much should be smooth sailing after that.
Well, it's the NDIS. So the other thing is. The other thing that she mentioned was the allowances after the product's been installed. And I think we need to touch on that as well. And we need to think about that big picture, the big picture beyond the final install and the final trial, and where the engineer and so forth say goodbye and go off and enjoy the world. There's more to it. There's insurance. How much is extras insurance going to cost you? And Blue Badge insurance is out there. Like we said in the last interview, no endorsements from Blue Badge. We just know that they're out there, and they specialize in disability insurance, whether it's car modifications, insuring your scooter, insuring your wheelchair against use, and so forth. So shout out to them if you want to go and look them up, Blue Badge Insurance. But what Dee was saying is that the difference between standard car insurance and specialty disability insurance for those products, that could be reimbursed or paid for by NDIS. So consider that in your future plans. And the other one was that petrol allowance, that allowance to allow her to actually use the product that's been prescribed. And that's one that I wasn't sure on. And she's saying that she's getting a petrol allowance to be able to help Leanne get out and about into the community, go see these football games, and have her as a community participant.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, She's great. The way she's, but her perspective on everything was perfect. Breaking it down to say, okay, well, if I didn't have a disability, this would be the case. But because I've got a disability, here's all the things linked to that, and that's very much justified. And yeah, that's I thought that was a great angle.
Yeah. All right, should we wind it up?
Let's wind it up. All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for joining us and listening in and listening to us unpack this whole thing. Thanks very much. Make sure you go back and listen to last week's episode 12 with Dee. If you haven't heard it, it'll make a lot of what we've talked about make a lot of sense. And also Dee, her contact details will be there. She is a great person and is willing to help everybody out there to help maximize, I guess, the use of NDIS and the community.
So many takeaways. We got a little bit passionate in this breakdown about products and wheelchair accessible versus turnout seats. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you've got feedback for us, please let us know. We do respond to feedback, so let us know if you're enjoying it. Let us know if there's any way that you would like to see it improved, and make sure that you share this episode with people that might find it really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
As we say in every episode, whether it's an interview or not, if you have any queries about what you can do or what will work for you, make sure you get in contact with your local OT or mobility dealer and set yourself up with a trial. Trials really do put you in the driver's seat. See you in the next episode.
Next time. If you like what you have heard, make sure you like, rate, and subscribe. It makes a massive difference. If you or anyone you know would like to share your story about driving with a disability, make sure you reach out to us through the socials. Just search for us. For more information and the resources mentioned in this episode, then go to the Drivable Podcast on Facebook and tune into the next episode. See you next time.